was a fascination with a soft, pale blue gemstone that gave these routes their eventual name, the Turquoise roads.
Turquoise was important for its beauty, and it conferred status on its wearer, but for the peoples of Meso-America, it also had another significance. Unlike the trade goods of the Eurasian Silk Road, silk and gold, which were valued largely for their rarity as well as for their beauty, turquoise also had a ritual sacred significance, as did the feathers of tropical birds, the parrots, the macaws, which traveled north along the Turquoise Road to the Anasazi in exchange for their turquoise.
To be sure, other goods such as obsidian, shells, and pottery were exchanged throughout the Americas. But by tracking the story of the turquoise trade, historians can trace the continual movement of cultural influences. Fortunately, there's a characteristic of this mineral that helps scientists follow the route that turquoise traveled. Using chemical fingerprinting techniques, it's possible to trace an individual piece, found in Mexico, for example, back to its source mine 1,000 miles to the north. The earliest surviving samples of finished turquoise found in Mexico appear to date from around 600 BCE, but large-scale use as a commodity didn't emerge until the first millennium CE. The Anasazi settlement of Chaco Canyon in northwestern New Mexico became a distribution center for the trading networks that connected the mines with their Mesoamerican customers. Among the first importers of turquoise were the dwellers at Alta Vista. This area was controlled by Teotihuacan, then the dominant city of Mesoamerica. Here, artisans imported raw chunks of the precious mineral and created finished pieces for export to the wealthy markets of central Mexico. Chaco Canyon's reign as the hub of the turquoise trade lasted about 150 years, and at its height, the distribution network stretched from the Pacific coast to the Yucatan Peninsula.
The Anasazi, of course, left no written memoirs, so our knowledge of the Anasazi is very incomplete. But there are very tantalizing hints of why these agrarian people invested so much energy in mining and trading vast amounts of turquoise to central Mexico. For example, we found at the northern Anasazi end of the trade route pens for holding macaws, tropical birds, suggesting that they were part of the deal. There is also evidence of the impact of Toltec religious ideas amongst both the Anasazi and their later Hopi and Zuni successors, including worship of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, whose worship required a variety of tropical feathers. Other scholars have speculated that perhaps the Anasazi traded turquoise in exchange for food as a hedge against famine in an unreliable desert environment. What we do know, though, is that the commodities that traveled in both directions along the Turquoise Road were sufficiently compelling to sustain that trade route for several centuries.
At the high point of turquoise traffic from Chaco Canyon, around the mid-10th through 12th centuries, the Toltec culture in central Mexico was reaching its zenith. Turquoise passed through the Toltec city of Tula and continued south another 900 miles to the Mayan complex of Chichen Itza. Around 1050 CE, the vastly dispersed communities across the Colorado Plateau suddenly changed into a highly structured, densely populated society. Their architecture began exhibiting features of Mesoamerican building styles, and high-status imports such as macaws, copper bells, and worked obsidian began to appear. And now, for the first time, the Anasazi themselves began to use turquoise in their rituals. Excavations have led archaeologists to conclude that the Anasazi absorbed many religious beliefs and ritual customs from the Toltec. Whether the Anasazi were formally part of the Toltec Empire, it's clear that Mesoamerican practices had been accepted into their existing culture. The Mexica, or Aztecs, were successors to the Toltec in Mesoamerica, and they adopted both the Toltec gods and the Toltec desire for turquoise.
The Mexica, or Aztecs, unlike the Maya, had no written language. So historians today are dependent upon the recollections of Mexica notables that were written down by Spanish friars and chroniclers in the 16th century. A particularly important and valuable source of this kind are the 12 volumes written down in Nahuatl by the Franciscan Bernardino de Sahagún, which we know today as the Florentine Codex. This codex, although mediated by its interviewer, is an invaluable source of information about Mexica life and history, including the various conquests that created the Aztec Empire, which at its height may have ruled over as many as 25 million people.
This passage from the Florentine Codex, collected by Spanish monk Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, illustrates the riches acquired by the Mexica in the course of their conquests.
And in their time appeared gold lip and earplugs and rings for the fingers and necklaces with radiating pendants and fine turquoise and enormous green stones and long quetzal feathers and the skins of wild animals and long trupial feathers and blue cotinga and red spoonbill feathers.
The brilliant results of Mexica turquoise work testified to the splendor of their wealth, as well as the great spiritual regard in which they held the precious gem. Turquoise was used on masks and shields, but as was the case with the silk and gold roads, much more than simple trade goods were moving along the turquoise roads. These networks provided natural opportunities for the spread of religion. The feathered god, Quetzalcoatl, seems to have flown along the turquoise road. There is compelling physical and artistic evidence that many ceremonies and beliefs made their way north into the rituals of the Hopi and Zuni peoples of the modern-day southwestern United States. Of course, it's likely that as these religious ideas spread, they changed in response to the different physical, political, and cultural landscapes they encountered. In a real sense, the ideas, beliefs, and customs that migrated between continents created a more indelible impact than the silk, gold, and turquoise that gave these roads their name.